Hey, welcome everybody. This is Bill Fanning coming to you live from Recfest in Nashville, Tennessee. So definitely it's going to be an interesting outdoor conference in the rain, which is just starting. So I guess it's going to rain for the whole time we're here. So that should make it fun. But really glad you guys can make some time today to come and listen, talking about recruiter enablement. I'm really excited for today's conversation. I've known Adam for a long time and really excited to just talk about what recruiter enablement is and discuss what you guys may be doing to achieve that. And Adam has conducted so many interviews. I think he's forgot how many, but we can just have a discussion around what it is and what it means. But before we jump into it, I just wanted to go over a couple things. One, next week, I've created 3 meetings, one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday, and one on Thursday. Each meeting will be the same, so you don't need to attend more than one. But the goal is to talk about the board structure within Talk and getting more people to participate so we can kind of reignite the board at the community level. We have a lot of people that want to do activities with us, and local help would be awesome setting that up. The second thing is I am making decisions on content and topics and things that I would really love and value your feedback on. So the more people who are collaborating with me, the more valuable our sessions can be, because we can address and approach topics that are valuable to all of us. And while I think I do a good job, I do want and really need your feedback. So that's kind of the goal of the meetings next week. The second thing is, if we've had a lot of people join over the last month or so, we're getting 5 to 10 people a day joining Talk. So please refer your friends. It's awesome. If there's anybody here who's on the webinar because somebody shared the link with you, come and join and participate in our community. It's free, and we really value your feedback and your thoughts as we expand what Talk is for all of us. And the final thought is, as we're expanding the vendor directory, I'd love for you guys, if there's a vendor that you've found extremely successful in your environment, if you can go in and make a referral or a recommendation and review them in our vendor directory, that allows our other members to learn from your experience and benefit from that feedback. So the more reviews we get, the more valuable that information becomes. So I would encourage you to jump in and do a quick review if you have time. Only takes a second or two. And it makes that interactivity of our directory much more valuable to all our members, because they can go in and get firsthand experience of how it's benefited you. So that would be awesome. So with that, I'm going to let Adam introduce himself. He's been a great member of the TA community and done a lot of amazing things. And I'm excited for this discussion. So Adam, I'm going to turn over to you if you want to introduce yourself to everyone. That'd be great.
Great. Yeah, sure. Bill, thanks very much for having me. It's great to be here. Great to meet you all. So I started my recruitment career in 1999 as an agency recruiter. Didn't particularly enjoy talking to candidates. So after 3 years, I moved out of that and into recruitment marketing, which I really did enjoy. I then spent a couple of years at PwC in the HR consulting area. And then probably I realized I wasn't actually a great employee, to be honest. I was just not very good at following rules and a bit maverick. And anyway, I started a talent sourcing business. We sold that to that was in 2009. We sold that to an executive search firm, a London listed company, in 2012. I stayed there for 4 years. I really enjoyed my time there, leading that business unit. And then in 2016, I started a recruitment technology business, my first tech business. That was called Candidate ID. And it was 6 years from start of the company through to acquisition by iCIMS. So we became part of iCIMS in January 2022. And I spent 10 months in that business. Really learned a lot while I was there. I was just embedding Candidate ID into the company, talking to the product teams and the marketing teams and making sure that they really understood what Candidate ID was alongside all of the other products that they offer, working with their sales teams to furnish them with all of the right content assets and things that they need to take Candidate ID out to market. That company's revenue from that Candidate ID product was something like 6 times what it was when they acquired us 12 months later. And so I think it was quite a good acquisition, and it was a great experience for me. So I started a new business in August 2023 called Poetry, and it's all about recruiter enablement. And I'm not going to be talking to you about poetry and pitching poetry, but I certainly want to talk about recruiter enablement because I've spent thousands of hours researching this subject. And I'd love to find out all your comments and things in the chat. So please do get involved during the course of the session.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So I think one of the things that would be really interesting to me, and because we have a lot of buzzwords floating around the TA industry, I'd be really curious. Adam, you've obviously done a lot of interviews, but I've definitely opened this up to everybody. What is recruiter enablement in your environment? Because I think in some places it's people, some places it's process, and some places it's technology. So I'd love to talk about that a little bit and really, think about, as you look at what you're doing in your world, recruiter enablement, what enables you to be more efficient at your tasks, at your job, and recruiting and sourcing and interviewing and onboarding and doing assessments is so many steps and tasks. What makes enablement happen for you?
So it might be useful for me to talk about the journey that I had to that phrase and the sort of moments of inspiration. When I was in iCIMS, as I mentioned, I spent time with the marketing teams and the product teams and the sales teams. And I specifically spent some time with the sales enablement team. Now, that's a group of people it might be 3 or 4 people, and their job full-time is enabling the 350 sellers in that organization. So when you are a seller, you need lots of different content. You need lots of different tools and apps and calculators and props and things and processes to go from like a cold call outreach right through to closing the deal, customers onboarding. There's a lot of different steps, and there's a lot of things that you need to do your job as a salesperson. Now, that team's job was to make it easy for them to access all of those assets. And they were using a technology product called HighSpot, which is a sales enablement technology. And what that does is it allows that sales enablement team to store all of those things in easy to use libraries, easy to access content. And so I could go into something like HighSpot and I could say, right, I'm thinking about pitching this healthcare system. And it'll come out with, okay, here's a cold call message. Here's an in-mail message. Here's an elevator pitch. Here's how you might structure your first stage conversation. Here's the objections you'll have and how to overcome those. Here's how to do a demo. Here's the objections you'll have at that stage and how to overcome those. Here's the question. Here's the issues around pricing that might come up and how you're going to handle that. And it's like, absolutely, here's the blueprint for, like, paint by numbers. This is how to do sales. So as I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, how do we enable recruiters with all of the right in-mail messaging or like outreach messaging and the right social media posts and email copy and job adverts and job descriptions and personas and interview questions and recruitment research? And there are so many different pieces of content and information that recruiters need at multiple different steps throughout their journey working on that rec. that they're just all over the place. Typically, they're like, some are on SharePoint, they might be in a Google Drive, they might be in Teams folders. People might have their own local folder on their laptop with things in there. And so there's like things all over the place. And typically a recruitment team has not got a centralized, let's just call it repository, for all of those enablement assets in the way that sales teams do in a sales enablement technology. So I did 200 hours of focus groups last year before starting to build a company in this area. And my focus groups revealed some very specific and interesting things. So the first is, recruiters have typically 20 plus browser tabs open all the time because they've got to use so many different things to get a task achieved, right? That is stressful. That's really stressful. Having all that, like all those things on your browser is just like constantly sort of sending a signal to your brain that you've got a lot of stuff to do, and it's loads of conflicting priorities. The second thing is on the subject around like typically they don't have any kind of a central repository. There's things all over the place. That is also stressful. And what it means is recruiters are constantly on Slack or on Teams posting, hey, does anybody know where I can find this policy about maternity arrangements in Venezuela? Or what is the policy around how we do, how do we do advertising in North Dakota? Or has anybody got a like some social media posts or social media outreach messaging for this job that I'm going to be hiring based in Boston or whatever it is? Like, because things are not easy to find, individuals do not want to spend the time, sunk time that they're not spending engaging talent, that they're spending going and like searching for things, because things are not typically well organized and they're all over the place. And then the next stage of that is, if people can't find what they're looking for, and they normally don't get a response back from somebody on Teams saying, yeah, here it is, straight away, then what they'll typically start doing is they'll start creating their own. And of course, what that means is, with nowhere to store and collaborate, on different content assets or policies or Boolean strings or whatever it is, they'll build their own, not necessarily knowing that the person that sits next to them built the same thing last week or last month or a few months ago. So there's duplication of work. And we did some research with an organization based in the UK to find out how much time do people spend effectively building and managing the assets that they need to do their job every day. And it was 2 hours and 43 minutes. I mean, that's just like far too much time spent on doing these things. So if recruiters were better enabled, then they could save a very considerable amount of time on getting their tasks done. So I'll stop there, because what I just wanted to do was like frame the issue a little bit before I explain a little bit more about what do I think recruiter enablement is, because I didn't really answer your question there, but I just wanted to like explain the issue, and really interested to know, Bill or anybody else that's joined here, like what do you think? I see there's a couple of comments in there.
From my standpoint, I can definitely appreciate that, because I've dealt with it as in the recruiting role, as well as a hiring manager for sales and being a salesperson, because there's so many tabs open. And, like for me, one of the biggest problems was timeouts. So I'd have 20 tabs open and I'd go back to a tab and it would have logged out, and I'd have to log back into yet another system. So I'm sure there's a lot of people in here that have that same challenge, but I'd love to hear from some of the members as well.
We've got a few comments in here. Kayla said that resonates. Organizing information effectively and keeping it updated is very time consuming. It really is. And the job of a recruiter, even more so than most jobs, because the typical recruiter job, you need to be an expert in recruitment marketing and talent sourcing and negotiating and data analysis and CRM campaigns and interviewing, assessing people. I mean, on their own, these are all completely different, skills. You need different parts of your brain to do some of these things. So it's more amplified for recruiters than it is for most professions, I think. And Evilise has said, clear processes, automation, autonomy, manager support. Yeah, I agree. They are some of the things that can help make this all a lot smoother and really depressurize the environment for a recruiter, for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things that's interesting to me as well is that the time that this can return. So I'll use a different example because you talked about sales. As leading sales teams in the past, or being in the sales environment or marketing, the mundane tactical activities between systems or tabs that are open prevent sometimes more strategic things being done. So I would, and in recruiting, for me, it was working with the hiring manager and vetting candidates more thoroughly and having more inclusion discussions around what are the types of people we want to hire. Because I'm overloaded with manual tasks, I'm not investing the time that I should in strategic activities that make the hiring process better. So I'm wondering how many other people have felt that, because I've felt it in recruiting and in sales and marketing.
I mean, you really want to be selfish with your time, don't you? You really want as much time as possible to spend on the activities which are going to, get the most jobs filled or make you the most money, or whatever it is. We're very, in recruiting, we're very mission oriented, and we just want to get the jobs filled. And so anything that's getting in our way of that is another thing, because a lot of the most successful recruiters that we all know, they're typically kind of lone wolf type operators, and so anything that gets in their way is they're gonna find workarounds. Yeah, they're going to find workarounds to not do those tasks, which they probably should do, or they're going to bypass the system somehow if the system is not enabling them to get those recs filled.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So, go ahead, Adam. Look, I was going to ask a question that I have, but you can go first. Well, I was curious, like when you look at this and all of these tasks, and you've talked to a number of people, what are kind of like the most time consuming areas? Like when you look at what you're solving through enablement, what are some of the areas that you really have max impact on? Is it the jumping between systems? Like, I'm really curious, because I think that would really be an interesting area to talk about as a group.
Yeah. Okay. So there are lots of tasks, right? So I definitely think about it from the technology perspective and from the angle of, like, how can we automate repetitive tasks? And so as I did my 200 hours of focus groups and the thousands of hours that I've researched this since then, I think we can break it down into 4 things. The first one, and I use an acronym, MOLT, M-O-L-T. MOLT stands for marketing, operations, learning, and tools. So let's start with the first one, M for marketing. Recruiters need to be expert marketers. What we have, more and more, and what we've done typically is we have tried to train recruiters to be able to make videos and to be able to write great social media posts and to be able to write great job adverts. I think that's an okay solution. But the fact is, some people have, by the time they start their career in recruitment, some people have either got a natural ability to be a great writer, or they have been taught to be a great writer, a great content producer. If you start trying to teach somebody who doesn't necessarily have the willingness to learn or the interest to learn or the skills, because you do need skills, then my belief is it's much better to spoon feed them with everything that they need. So taking inspiration from sales enablement technologies, which have got libraries for things like outreach messaging, job adverts, social media posts, objection handling responses. If we can equip recruiters with libraries where they can just draw down the assets they need, and if they don't exist, you can create templates which are infused with generative AI, so that will, build things for you instantly, like in seconds, which are on brand and in context. Then that's something which I think that's the M for marketing. I mean, there's other things around that, like we want them to have access to understanding about candidate personas. We want them to be able to create images. We want them to be able to, there's a whole variety of different things associated with marketing, but the marketing job, depending on the sector or profession that you're working in, marketing is more or less important. If you work for an organization where you've got an influx of individuals, you've really got to focus on, like, how do we make sure that we're only bringing through the people that are really relevant for the job? But if you're working in an area where you're targeting in-demand talent, like in healthcare, for example, then you've got to be a great marketer. So that's the first one, is around the area of marketing.
Kayla just asked a great question, and I wanted to bring it up because she asked about recruiter autonomy and what that looks like. And has anyone found that there is a generational component to it? Because her definition of autonomy means not providing too many boundaries, encouraging curiosity and critical thinking. But she's finding that some people on her team are paralyzed by ambiguity. And so I think that's an awesome topic, and I'd love to get other people's thoughts on it.
So I don't know if this is a cliched phrase or it's just one that I've heard from somebody specific, but freedom within a framework is something that I really like. So when we talk about recruitment marketing, for example, what we want to be able to do, we want recruitment marketers to be able to provide all of the assets a recruiter needs to get their tasks done in terms of like outreach, attraction, that type of thing. And then if they, perhaps giving them the ability to add in their own personality and their own sizzle without changing the message of the marketing content. So, what we don't want is people describing the organization in different ways. Well, yeah, what I'm saying is, like, I think that if you can give people templates so that the right messaging, like for a job advert, for example, it's always got the same type of introduction. It's always got the same call to action and the same description of the company in it and that type of thing. But that middle section where you're describing the job and what it's like to work in that team and what's the benefits to the individuals, if recruiters can add their own sort of spice into that, I think that's great. But if you don't give any type of templating, like then, and I mean, two recruiters sitting next to each other who could both be great content developers are going to put things out into the market that are probably not going to look alike. They're not necessarily going to describe the company in the same way and that type of thing. That's bad. I think there does needs to be a little bit of governance around this type of thing. But Kayla, I'd be interested to know, like, what do you think?
That helps. It validates a bit. I think part of what I'm seeing might be unique to our organization because we grew our team very quickly, and we went from a core team that had worked together for a long time and understood and were really aligned on just our jobs and how to sell and how to do all of those pieces. And now we have a pretty diverse team in terms of experience. And so we have actually provided a lot of tools. And I've been wrestling with, have we made poor hiring decisions, or do we need to provide more framework or more? I just might be more comfortable with the gray when I say, here's your tools, here's the job, go. And it's deer in a headlight. And I'm just like, well, go be curious. Like, you have the basics. I think my definition of basics is probably still a little too broad compared to somebody coming in. And I'm also in-house in healthcare in a very old school organization, and people coming from agency, it is quite different. So That's where it's hard. Am I hand holding too much? Am I not hand holding enough?
Yeah, I mean, I believe in I do believe in giving people the opportunity to have their hands held when they walk down the street, and then maybe if they don't need it held, then allowing them, to go and walk themselves. Your point around, I wonder whether, so what you said was, I think you said something about, is it a generational issue? So I don't know, did we I started in 1999. Did we maybe have, I was given complete free reign, pretty much do what you want, just get the jobs filled. And, in a staffing agency environment. And so, yeah, I think the world has changed a bit since then.
Yeah. I don't want to pick on the younger generation because it's fine. My generation was picked on too. We're none of us are perfect, but I do think there's just a different level of support maybe that the younger generation has gotten. And so they're more accustomed to having framework is probably a really good word for it. And then, there's a point of discretion within the team and the company itself on what's needed. And again, we might have to own some of that for not hiring the right personalities, but it's just I've just noticed it's usually the younger, newer people on the team, and they do have a lot of tools. The other thing though I have found is that encouraging curiosity is surprisingly difficult. Here's your template, and then they don't stray from the template. And I'm like, I don't know. It's hard to define, and I might just need to be a little more flexible and creative myself in how I try to coach. But that's where I'm always like, well, here's a template, but by the way, you don't have to stick to the letter of the law. You can be creative. So I think maybe that's where some of the discomfort comes from, is they're kind of afraid to stray outside of any structure.
Yeah, I mean, there's something else about what is the absolute best practice for whatever that marketing asset is that you need? Because if you ask 10 people to write a job advert, somebody's going to write the best one. If you ask 10 people to write a social media post, somebody's going to write the best one. So I do wonder if actually there's a rising tide lift all boats, and therefore maybe we should all be collaborating on all these things and continuously use the best one and try and continue to make it better. I mean, that's against what you said, which is allowing people the freedom to do what they want. But it's still about collaborating, and it's still about, I think there's a cultural issue about that, not just with you as a manager, and different managers have got different beliefs in these things. Different organizations do as well, because there's a big bank that I know very well. They would be crying at the thought of allowing people to go and do their own things on marketing.
Yeah.
So
that is good. I like that.
Ryan said it needs solid employment branding. Yes, it does. Solid employment brand. It does. But again, how far do you go with that? You could go with, right, here's the templates. You can put your own spice into it. Or it could be, here's what you have to use. You only use these assets. Do not change them. Some organizations, the employment brand team will provide assets and say, like images, for example, and say, only use these 6 things. Don't use anything different. And then there's others where they'll say, okay, here's 6 images, but you can use these in different ways and be creative with how you use these, for example. So we've talked about marketing. Let me move on to the next one, which I think is it's a bit of a catch-all for some other things, and it's operations, so recruitment operations. There are, in the context of recruiter enablement, recruitment operations to me includes things like policies, processes, job descriptions, things like company structure, like organogram type things, pay and reward frameworks. Where are these? Sometimes they're in the HR system and they're in one central place. That's really great. But often where the pay and reward structures are, if there's something you can even find, are not situated where policies are. And then processes may not be documented anywhere. So, and then alongside that, in operations, I said MOLT, marketing operations learning tools. In the O, the other thing I would put in O is anything really to do with assessment. So it could be like, here's the structure for interviews. Here's the questions that we would use for interviews. Here's the scoring system that we would use for assessment, and those types of things. So again, if they're all documented, and then they're often, in most organizations I know, they've not been brought together in one central area. And so people, again, they're on teams asking each other, hey, where can I find this policy? Where can I find these interview questions? Where can I find this process? Or they're going and creating their own if they can't find them. So O is for operations. Interested to know if anybody's got any comments on that. It doesn't mean recruitment operations. Typically that's to do with all of the governance around how we do recruitment, and it's maybe the technology stack, and it's those types of things. But in the context of enablement, it's about where do I find all of the information I need, or the actual assets that I need. Any comments? Tony said it comes down to two types of recruiters: thinking recruiters and transactional recruiters. And guess who's going to be more thoughtful about the message that you put out to candidates? I mean, I can see within recruitment teams today, the teams are splitting. There's a very big e-commerce company that I know, which starts with an A, which has entirely split its recruiting team. And one of the team is focused on talent sourcing and interviewing and getting jobs filled. And the other team who has come out of those jobs, and now what they're doing is internal business partnering, and their job is advising the hiring managers around the strategies for how we're going to get these jobs filled, and where we're going to find the people, how we should be approaching them, and that type of thing. So thinking recruiters and transactional recruiters, I guess what Tony's talking about is like a personality trait or a kind of way of working, but they're actually, as Kat said, it's that the business partner, the talent acquisition partner versus recruiter. These are different things in some big teams now, absolutely. Okay, let's move on to L. L is for learning. That's the third sort of what I would call pillar of recruiter enablement. We've talked a bit about marketing. Recruitment's more of a marketing-led job than it has been. There's so many different things we need in there. O is for operations. We need a lot of things around policies and processes and interview guides and those types of things. L is learning. So a number of different aspects of learning. The first one I would talk about is research. So I would include talent intelligence in here. So it's things like the workforce demographics and the diversity statistics and the skills availability and location strategies and things like that. So that's one part of sort of learn intelligence. The second part of that, or research, second part of that would be about companies. So what do I know about those companies that I want to hire people from? Do I have battle cards with information about what's it like to work there, and what have we learned from our candidate interviews, and what are the poignant news stories about those organizations, gathering that together? And which companies are the most prominent employers in your location or the location you're trying to hire for? And how do you compare to them on salaries, and how do you compare to them on benefits and on career progression and all those types of things? Another part of research would be to do with job research. What's that job actually about? What are the skills needed to do it? What are the critical technical skills and the critical interpersonal skills or soft skills? What are the what's the sort of transferable skills from other jobs? What other jobs mean the same type of thing and have got an overlap? What are the career opportunities for somebody doing that particular job? What are the career aspirations and potential pain points of somebody doing that particular job? So there's a lot of different aspects to that part of learning, which is what I would call research. The second part of learning is the tactical stuff around getting my job done. How do I use the ATS? How do I use the CRM? How do I get my jobs advertised? What's our company's approach to diversity and inclusion? What's our company's approach to interviewing and assessment? What's our company's approach to attraction and advertising? What's our company's employer brand all about? What's our company's internal talent management sort of policies and process? So that would be the learning around, like, how do I hit my job on day one and start to make an impact on day 7 rather than on day 30, which is what happens a lot of the time. So if we can give people what they need to actually start working on Recs quite quickly, then that's a big, big win. And then the other aspect of learning would be what I would call performance learning. So it's the type of thing that you would get from, there's certain learning providers in our space which offer training around, here's how to do stakeholder management, here's how to achieve influence, here's how to be able to manage more recs in one go, here's how to be able to do certain things like with a degree of high performance. So learning. As I said earlier, I'm a big fan of spoon feeding people with what they need, but there are certain things where people would actually prefer to be taught and to go and do it themselves. And so I think that learning in terms of like research, company information, job-related information is really vital. And if you can put that into people's hands, then it saves them so much time.
One question, Adam, and I'm curious if you've come across this. The learning aspect, to me, part of it seems like it's a continuous process, which is working with hiring managers and learning what specifically that role needs in a candidate to be successful. So to me, that learning aspect comes down. So you've talked about spoon feeding and giving somebody the framework to be successful, but there seems to be a little bit of a more finite process for me, which is understanding specifically for the roles I'm recruiting for, what is the persona you want me to bring in? So it's a consistent process. And it's interesting because it also, from an operational standpoint, seems to go back to the different types of the folks that are in the role and who's going to go be able to craft that message or receive that message from the hiring manager. So the learning aspect seems to, and I'm curious how other people think about this, but from my perception, it seems to be a pretty important task for successfully bringing somebody in.
Yeah, I completely agree. Look, I mean, a typical in-house recruiter, especially, they could be working on a treasury manager and a receptionist and a financial controller job all at the same time. And that's 3 of the 15 recs they're working on, or 30 recs they're working on, or whatever it is. Now, you can't be an expert in all of those jobs. If you're an agency recruiter, then maybe you can. Like my first job for 3 years was placing newly qualified chartered accountants from accountancy practices in Glasgow, Scotland, into companies in industry at salaries of £25,000 to £35,000. That was like how narrow my focus was. I knew pretty much everybody. I knew everybody that was hiring for somebody like that. And I knew the ins and outs of their jobs as an auditor and how it would translate into a job as a tax accountant or a financial accountant or whatever it might be. But I certainly couldn't have done a receptionist and a treasury manager and a financial controller and a Java developer, all at the same time. So I entirely agree. I think that information about all of this needs to be documented, needs to be stored, managed for easy retrieval. Absolutely. It would be part of what I would say about, like I mentioned, job-related learning. And that's a job. When I say job-related learning, that means to do with particular recs that you might hire in your organization. I mean, if you're working on critical hire type positions, like if you work at IQVIA and you're continuously hiring clinical project managers, that job inside out. But yeah, for most people, they're probably not doing the same job, working on the same job all the time. So storing all of that great hiring manager intelligence and sharing that somewhere is great. Now, we have a massive benefit today that we did not have even 2 years ago, and that is we can transcribe our meetings with the hiring managers if we're doing it on Teams. In fact, even if we're not, we can put on a record, just say I'm going to record it to transcribe it, and we can then turn that automatically into a bullet point summary of the most important, aspects that was discussed, and we can store that either in the ATS or in some sort of a central, enablement hub. So we've got a lot of, and then we can also use retrieval technology, search technology. That's maybe a conversational interface type thing where you say, okay, bring me up all the information you've got about what it's like to work as an assistant treasury manager in our company. And it generative AI can do retrieval augmented generation, and it can return back in a format for you, which is reading your documents, reading those hiring manager notes, reading anything else you've got in there, and return it in a way where it's really just like concise, so that as a recruiter, within 3 seconds, you've got what you need. So we do have advantages in how we manage all of that data. It's all data, right? There's loads of it. Let me come on to there's quite a lot of additional questions and things in the chat here and comments, and this is wonderful. I'm going to move on to the last sort of pillar of what I think recruiter enablement includes, and then maybe we could come back to some of these. So the T, I talked about marketing. There's loads of assets we need. It's a real marketing-focused job today, recruiting. Operations, in terms of like all the policies, processes, interview questions, frameworks, things like that. L is learning. It's the practical learning around what to press to get my job done. It's the performance learning. And then it's all the intelligence type stuff about jobs, about companies, and about like the workforce demographics. T is for tools. Now, it's quite a ambiguous like description, but this means all the other things that you need. And partially it's about making sure that you do have an appropriate tech stack and that recruiters can access what they need. So you might need something to create videos with. You might need something to distribute text messages with. You might need something to create landing pages with. There's lots and lots of different technologies that you might have access to. I think the world definitely wants a consolidated tech stack. Recruiters want to get everything done in less places than they did. But it would not be unusual for a recruiter to have to use 10 different technologies to get everything done. So bringing them all together to be accessible from one place, so that they're not continuously on Teams saying, what's that thing I need to use for videos? What's that thing I need to use for competency-based assessments? What's that thing I need to use for whatever it is, diversity and inclusion filters for my text or whatever. So you want to make sure that all of the tools that somebody has access to or should have access to is all accessible to them in an easy way, so that they don't have the 20 browser tabs open at all times. Other tools that I recommend a business case builder for managers, because honestly, if you are trying to get that cliched seat at the table, right? You get the seat at the table by being the sort of person who is able to get your business cases approved. So if you've got a business case builder, that's a tool that I highly recommend. Another tool that I recommend is the battle cards. In fact, somebody asked on the chat who should have access to battle cards. Recruiters should have access to battle cards. Let's say I'm hiring, quantitative analysts based in New York City. I want to know I'm going to be approaching 3 people who all work for JP Morgan. I want to know what it's like to work at JP Morgan ahead of doing those calls, because I really want every piece of ammunition I've got to be able to generate the optimum chance that they say, yes, I'm interested in having the conversation, or yes, I'll come in and meet the hiring manager. And if I know something about that company which gives me some competitive advantage, that's really helpful. So I think they need access to that. For anybody that doesn't know what Battle Card is, it's basically a central resource, like a wiki, for all the intelligence that we have about what's it like to work at that organization that we might hire from. Other things in terms of tools. Tools could be lots of different things to different companies, because of course, if you're in a high volume sort of environment, there's certain things you're going to want to use, whereas somebody hiring quantitative, traders in New York City will probably not need that type of thing. So T for tools is mostly to do with just bring them all together and make them accessible to make them accessible to recruiters really easily.
Yeah. There's a question from Ivelis in the chat about putting the name. Was that, Ivelis, is that for the business case builder, or I just want to make sure we put the right name in there for you in terms of some of the things we're talking about?
The cards.
Oh, great.
Well, battle cards. So battle cards, you could, to be honest, you could do it in SharePoint. You could do it in any work like collaboration sort of tool. You can do it in. You just set up a tab, which is JP Morgan and Credit Suisse and HSBC and Morgan Stanley, whatever, and then everybody just adds to those. That would be a kind of an okay way of doing it. We do it, yes, battle cards, yes. I don't want to make this a pitch for poetry, but we have a solution, a battle card solution within our poetry workspace, which incidentally, if anybody wants to go and have a look at, it's free for one user for every company. So you just go to poetryhr.com, fill in the form, and you'll get an email with your login access. How you within a few minutes. It's an automated system. So if you want to use that for battle cards, then there's a pretty good battle card solution in there. But yeah, there may be other things. If you just Google battle cards providers, you'll potentially find some things. The concept is a sales concept. It's it's marketing intelligence typically. So if I'm pitching iCIMS technologies to a company that's using Workday or a company that's using Greenhouse or something else, then I'm probably going to want to know what are their strengths and weaknesses in comparison to our organization. So what should I be really amplifying when I'm doing that sales meeting? It's the same type of concept as that.
Sure. Adam, quick question for you. When people create these battle cards, that's such critical information to be presenting. The why work here? What's valuable about this place? I'm going to go back to your first letter, your M, because in the marketing messaging, that battle card information is so mission critical and but time consuming, right? That's not easy to do. And that takes a certain type of person that has the ability to take that message and put it into a marketing capability to educate applicants or candidates out there why you're such a great place to work. What are some of the tools you found or processes that help people do that? Because to me, that would make me more effective in my job of bringing people in and getting them excited about working at my company.
Yeah. At the risk of saying poetry, I'm not going to say poetry because I don't really know anything else that can actually just do that. But what you can do is, you can, as a sort of way of testing the power of this, you could go onto ChatGPT and you could literally type in, please list for me the strengths and weaknesses of JP Morgan as an employer in New York City, include information about their leadership, include information about their culture, include information about their compensation. You're going to get some great information back. You then say, here's our company's EVP, employer value proposition. Here's our company's any other information you want to share. And then you can say, okay, now create an in-mail template, a cold call telephone script, a social media post, and a job advert for working in our company as a quantitative trader and amplifying the strengths that we offer, especially against the downsides of potentially working at JP Morgan. If you get that right, you can, it's going to take time to get the right wording and all that sort of thing as well. You're going to get an absolutely brilliant piece of information back around, how to structure that communication, whether it's written or it's a telephone script or whatever it is. The other thing you can do is, let's say it's for a quantitative trader, right? I don't even really know what a quantitative trader does. I'm just keep saying it anyway. You could also in ChatGPT ask, what are the short-term aspirations for typical quantitative traders? What are the long-term career goals of a quantitative trader? And what are the career pain points of a quantitative trader, right? And you can ask ChatGPT to use that information also in the context of our company's strengths as in an employer value proposition and things like that versus JP Morgan's, potentially their weaknesses as an employer. So you pull all of this together and you end up with, content which is absolutely sharp, on context, on brand, and is setting you up for what could be a very, very good, approach to those individuals. So we orchestrate all of that within Poetry. We bring together all of that together in order to create output which is on brand and in context, as I've just described. But you'd have to do a lot of experimentation, but you could probably just do that in Claude or in Gemini or in ChatGPT, and you'll have a lot of fun doing it as well. I would recommend doing it. See what happens. Did that answer the question?
It did for me, and I think I actually use that quite a bit. The ChatGPT testing. It's fun to get feedback quickly from that tool in terms of, hey, am I on point? And it does some good work there. So I like that a lot. So we have, I think, about 5 minutes left. So I just wanted to share, hopefully this was a great discussion. I definitely thought it was well-structured, and Adam, I really appreciate it. Is there any questions from anyone in the group that they have that we could tackle in the last couple minutes? Adrian, thanks for the feedback. I think it also was a great discussion. And I think Adam made a great point. Kat, that's a great question. And Adam, I'm going to let you tackle that one. What would be the initial steps for putting a recruitment program in place? Yeah,
I've done a lot of study around this, and the first step is definitely to go and live the life of a recruiter in your team. Watch what they press. Watch everything they do. Ask them what their challenges are. Ask them what takes longer than they expect it to, right? And then just create a massive list. Go and do it with every recruiter in the team if you can. Call for feedback. Call for what's your frustrations in your job. And once you've got that information, you can then try and put the different items that could use fine tuning. Try and put them into buckets, like I have, marketing, operations, learning tools. Try and put them into buckets like that, and then work out, okay, which ones are going to make the optimum impact with the minimum effort. And there will be a lot of low-hanging fruit. There will be a lot of low-hanging fruit probably in your applicant tracking system alone, with duplicative processes that people are doing, and actually they've just never mentioned that doing it a different way would be better. So actually starting with your applicant tracking system is not a bad one. It's very likely that your team are only using 30% of the capability of the ATS, and there's a reason why like these ATS providers created so much functionality is because their customers have asked for them, and most recruitment teams I know are not using anything like the capability that they've got. Start by just asking recruiters what's causing them problems and what's taking too long, and then try and establish what are the right. That's what when I started this process of learning about it back at the beginning of last year, there was about 100 people with a recruiter enablement or similar job title. There's now nearly 400. So, it's much as it's not a huge number of people that are dedicated to it, out of probably a million plus recruiters in the world, it's really grown a lot. The subject's really grown a lot.
Yeah, we have one question from Tony that I'd love to tackle because I think it's a great question. What's the most favorite collaboration tool to house recruiter enablement molt information? Because I think there's probably a myriad of answers, but I'd love to get your thoughts, Adam.
I mean, I don't want to make it a sales message, but I can only say poetry. Really, there is nothing else. I think the next best thing is probably a Google site or a SharePoint site, possibly a Notion site or Confluence. You can do some of this on Notion, Confluence, SharePoint, Google Sites. Applicant tracking systems should have done this. They should have done it. And they've really missed a trick, I think, by really overemphasizing the importance of managing a vacancy and managing active candidates. Now, I'm not saying that's not important. It is, but they've not typically gone and looked at what are all the other things that a recruiter needs to do in a day, and how can we help solve for those tasks? There's a lot missing. Almost every recruitment technology is in some way to do with candidate profiles, whether it's finding them, assessing them, managing them through the vacancy, or managing the ongoing relationship in a talent pool. Mm-hmm. Nearly everything is to do with candidate profiles.
Yeah, I agree. Well, listen, we are at the end of our time, and I always want to return people because I appreciate you giving us an hour of your time to come and participate in this discussion, which I think was awesome. And really, really appreciate everyone's information that they shared with us. So thank you very much, Adam, for coming and spending time with us. And we will be returning to RecFest, so we'll wave hi to your coworker while we're here, who is proudly wearing a kilt to represent Scotland, which I think is awesome. And thanks everyone for giving us your time. And we definitely appreciate it. We'll be shutting this down now, but thanks everybody very much and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much.